Check. Check 1, 2. There we go. It works. That's what I love about this game. You turn it, you plug it in, and you check it, and then you just go. Welcome to the show. My name is Dean. Nice to have everybody back. We've got an interesting program for you today. Once in a while, well, all the time, what I like to do when I don't understand something is bring in people who understand all of it or who understand more than me, which isn't very difficult. That's why I have a massive Rolodex of people. I'm like, hey, I don't understand that. Can someone talk to me about these things? In the world that we live in, digital content, online content, there are certain Sherpas out there that I like to share with everybody here in our audience. We've got a couple of million people that'll tend to pop in from time to time every month and say, hey, what are you guys teaching us? What are we learning? In the hellscape of social media, there are a couple of people that I hold to be my Sherpas when it comes to information. One of them is a gentleman named Matt Navarra. This guy's incredible. If you don't, and if you haven't been to his website, mattnavarra.com, you should go there. His link tree is in the bio. It's also in the description here. If you go to YouTube, Dean Blundell Show on YouTube, you can check it out. You go to Crier Media, you can check it out as well. But he's incredible. He's one of Europe's most in-demand social media consultants. He hails from Wales. Good British guy. Being a British guy myself, I like to go home for that information. So we're going to talk about what he thinks this is all about now, social media. We're going to talk about X. We're going to talk about Meta. We're going to talk about a bunch of different subjects today when it comes to social media. We're going to break down why he decided to leave X because he did this big announcement the other day. But this dude popularizes trends, the latest tech. He breaks down innovation, news on social media better than most. He consulted for Meta, Google, BBC, the UN, among others. He's a guest event speaker. He's done appearances and media appearances for the New York Times, BBC, TechCrunch, and The Verge. I've read him in The Verge and TechCrunch a bunch of times. He's terrific. And the link is in the description as well. Please welcome to the program. Very long intro. It's like 2.5 minutes. Sorry, Matt. Matt Navarra, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you, Matt. You get a round
Thank
of
you.
applause.
I can't ask for a better intro than that.
Did you like that one? I really
that was a good one.
it.
We'll use that again for something else, I think.
I'm just glad you're here. I tried to have you on the show last time. I tried to have you on. You're undergoing a major reno. Is that done?
It's sort of done. I'm sort of getting there. Little bits are being retouched and fixed and things, but it's a little bit less chaotic than it was a few weeks back. So we're getting there.
Do you ever? It's funny. Everybody gets excited to start a renovation where you're like, yeah, let's redo the kitchen, and then you start redoing the kitchen or redoing a bathroom. Like, this is way more involved than I thought it was. Now I regret doing any of this. Did you get to that point at all?
I just make sure that it's someone else doing it, and then I'm not got the worry of all of that because I've got no skills when it comes to DIY. I'm a modern man, didn't grow up with a dad who forced me to fix engines or put things on walls, so I have no skills. So I'm fortunate that I can afford to get someone just to do it for me, and then I can pretend that I did it, and it looks great.
Did you ever did? But you're obviously married with a beautiful family. But like back when I was dating before I got married, I would tell girls that I was really handy, even though I wasn't. It was like one of those things.
Well, my worst thing is I can't cook. I'm a useless cook. I wish I could cook, but it doesn't excite me to cook, and so I always get a bit nervous when then I have to kind of show off with my cooking skills because I don't. So that's a nervous moment. But luckily, I can delegate. Or again, there's always normally in the world there's somebody that can do it, and you pay them, and they will do the things that you can't do. So that's why I'm all right with that.
Yeah, attaboy. Good for you. That's why you're here, as a matter of fact. Really appreciate you doing this. MattNavarra.com. Go and check him out. Social media consultant. How do you become a social media consultant? How long have you been doing this for? Take me through the genesis of where Matt Navarra went from school to like, man, I'm going to dive into being a social media guy. I'm going to learn everything I can about it.
Yeah, well, I came from a generation where social media wasn't a thing. Like when I was at university in 2002 and I graduated in 2002, I did a degree in business and marketing. My first career job was working for a bank in London doing marketing type work on a 2-year scheme. Didn't really like it, didn't get on with my bosses, kind of rubbed them up the wrong way, thought I could do it better, thought I knew better, and moved around a bit. And in between 2002, 2008, 9, I'd done jobs like I trained to become a school teacher. I worked in advertising and marketing. I did a number of other sort of jobs that were completely unrelated to the field of social media. And then I took a job with the government in 2009. Social media was a thing, but it wasn't on my radar as a career move. And I was a communications manager for the government, and I was making Twitter accounts and Facebook pages for the government department I work for without being asked to do so and without the permission to do so, which is kind of how you have to run in government to get anything done. And it was that kind of sparked an interest in social media, plus a diagnosis in ADHD at the time also kind of reaffirmed what I'd probably be better at doing. And then things just snowballed from there. I got an opportunity to work in London for the Cabinet Office. I got offered the chance to work in Downing Street for the Prime Minister. And then I went on and worked for a news tech company called The Next Web, which is a bit like TechCrunch and Verge. Ran their social for many years. And it was only then in sort of 2015, 16 onwards, I'd started to build a following of people that were like me into what everything that was new in social media, all the new features that kept popping up. And I would share screenshots of them and people would send me some screenshots, and then I'd have the companies leaking them to me. And then I would start leaking it further. And eventually it became notorious for this guy who had all of these headlines being created about my tweets that were being included in articles that generated a lot of free marketing, so that when I left the Next Web and people knew that I was this social media geek, the transition from being employed into being a freelance consultant was quite a lot easier. And then from there, I've now sort of been doing freelance social media consulting for 4 or 5 years, and thankfully it still pays the bills. So yeah, that was a potted history.
Yeah, it's a hell of a potted history. Like, it's almost like you fell into it because of, your proclivity. You talk about ADHD, you have the same thing. You could spend like 2-3 hours and then you're bang, 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 because you're just distracted. So, your nervous system decided for you, and on one hand, but on the other hand, just being in it, it's almost like you accidentally fell into the knowledge that you so willingly share with people now.
Yeah, I didn't set out when I was working for the Next Web in 2013 to 2018. I didn't sit there one day and think I'm going to share these social media sort of links to or screenshots to new things with the idea that somehow people would be interested in it en masse and that I would get a following from that and that it would become a substantial part of who I am in my career. I was doing it because I was kind of geeky and thought maybe there's a few other geeks out there. And then it wasn't till much later on, to probably the sort of 2 years before I left the Next Web in 2015, 16, 17 onwards, I saw actually this is easy. If I just share screenshots of new features from these platforms, which I know I don't have to pay to get hold of, I just need to be on top of looking at the apps for new features. They're going to feature my tweets in articles, and then these articles go around the world. And suddenly, if I keep doing that over a period of time, people will be constantly seeing my name and social media tied together. So I kind of made that connection. And then from there onwards, I kind of just amped what I was doing in that space, and it kind of grew. And then I got TV and media appearances, and they that once you've done 1 or 2 of those and you do all right with them, then they kind of never stop ringing you, which is good if you like doing them or if they're useful to you. And that kind of again built the kind of persona of what I do with Geek Out, and now I kind of have random scenarios where things like someone will ring me from Netflix. Can you kind of come up and be in a show about such and such to do with social media? And we've seen your newsletter. Can we take this piece from it and use it in this article from somewhere else? And so yeah, everything's been a learning curve because it keeps on going up another level each year.
So imagine my surprise then, because when guys like you, who I read regularly in TechCrunch, The Verge, and then I found your website, I became a subscriber to Geek Out, which I encourage everybody to do. Your link tree is in the description of the podcast. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, Google, Spotify, etc., you can go to the description and you can actually sign up for the newsletter. You can also check out everything that Matt does, including his website, mattnavarro.com. But imagine my surprise, because I follow you and I'm very active on Twitter, right? Because I've got a one-track brain. Like, if you put 3 or 4 apps in front of me and said, update all these today at the same time, I'd be like, forget it, because my thumbs just don't go that way. It's how I'm operating. It's who I am, right? And then one of my guys, you, last week, 2 weeks ago, was like, peace out. I'm leaving. I'm out of here. I'm done with X. I'm done with Twitter. And, I know you make money talking about Twitter. I know that you're saying goodbye to revenue. I know that it interests you, the subject, the human experiment of Elon Musk interests you. So let's kind of start there. Obviously, being the biggest fire starter in the social media landscape, X, and what's going on with X. So what was the impetus for you to say, that's it, I'm out, I'm done?
Well, Yeah, there's a couple of things. It's been something that I've thought about for a while. It's something that's been bothering me in terms of my contributing to a platform that doesn't really um, sit well with me in terms of the moral and ethical decisions that are being made about the platform and some of the things that are going wrong with the platform and the impact of those decisions. We can talk about those in detail if you like as well. But so I think it was the general underlying kind of concern. I also felt that it was a bit hypocritical of me to be being so vocal about the things I didn't like about X, and particularly Elon Musk and his choices with the platform, and shouting about it, but then at the same time using the platform and not kind of having any sort of stance on it. So I felt that needed to be resolved, and I felt that also that the platform was getting to and reached for me a tipping point in terms of the value I was getting from it, the benefits that it was giving me versus the risk, if I was to stay there, in terms of my own reputation on the platform, and also the fact that the platform is continually in decline and in a chaotic kind of spiral downwards. And I felt that it was going to get to a point anyway for a lot of people where they would exit. And I thought I'd rather be doing it on my own terms than jumping with the rest of the crowd that do it at a later date. So that was kind of like my thought process. But you're right to say that there is a cost associated for me. Like most of my newsletter was based around my own tweets. And I use my weekly sort of newsletter curates what I've been tweeting about. And I go through my Twitter account to see what I've tweeted out to know what I want to put in a newsletter. So if I'm not tweeting at all, then it makes that process a little bit harder. And I've had to reconfigure how I approach building the newsletter. There are people who want to sponsor individual tweets of mine. They want to kind of me to help them promote a particular app or product or two. And if it's something that I like and think is really interesting to my audience, I would do. And there's a money to be made from me doing that as part of my business. And there's also indirect kind of incomes through other people who could contact me through Twitter to do consulting. And then finally, the one that was probably more concerning to me was my visibility, because the way I became known in some ways was through, a majority actually was through tweets that were getting embedded in articles from Verge, TechCrunch, BBC. And so if I'm not tweeting and they're not embedding those articles anymore, then do I cease to exist to a large number of people, because the account still creates millions of impressions every month and generates a lot of activity. So I have kind of sacrificed to some degree, but I'm kind of hedging my bets, thinking that actually I can do well on other platforms. Maybe not initially in the short term, I'll make some losses, but I think the right decision for me in terms of how I feel about it, I feel like making the right choice.
You know what? You brought up a couple things, and I want to kind of go down and get some minutia out of the moral and ethical dilemma you have being on that platform of X, as opposed to the functionality issues that we're seeing on X. Every day there's a new one, right? Timelines won't load. Can you break either of those two down? Is it a functionality thing? Is there like a thing in the tech influencer community where it's like, hey, don't be the last guy off Twitter? And what is the moral and ethical dilemma that you do have? Is it the same one we all have, and the same one the EU has? It gave Elon 24 hours to clean it up like 48 hours ago.
Yeah, I think the functionality one is less so, because the core functionality that I use has not dramatically changed, and that for some is an issue because there hasn't been a huge amount of innovation. And amongst all the things that Elon has launched, a lot of them are things that have been around before or tested before by the previous owners of the platform. So I don't think that's that so much, but it's true to say that there's been more bugs and it's not been as reliable as it once was. And there have been some new features added in terms of, or built upon, certainly in terms of the X Premium, which was previously Twitter Blue. But that stuff wasn't the things that were bothering me as much, because it was sufficient for my uses and I could work around the problems. But in terms of the things like Elon decided to bring back all of the accounts that was just previously suspended, and before he took over, there were accounts that had harassed and bullied and abused people on the platform, and suddenly making them active again, I thought was an insane decision. the decision to transform verification into a paid for product, obviously to some degree you could argue that there was some good foresight there because other platforms have followed his lead. But it's, again, with a lot of things with Elon, it's not necessarily always the decision he makes, it's the way that he implements some of these decisions. And so suddenly turning on verification as a paid for product and not having the steps in place to kind of protect brands and users from impersonation and the chaos that caused are a classic example of many other things that he's made and decided and that's caused problems on the platform. But also in terms of, you know, his view of freedom of reach and being more permissible of certain types of posts on the platform, I just don't think works, and it causes all number of problems. And his own views and his own opinions about things to do with what's going on in the world and in terms of his views on religion and politics and everything else sometimes have been particularly hard to kind of sit alongside. You know, when he's there tweeting out calling someone a paedophile or that they're into paedophilia when clearly and all evidence shows they are not, it is just a doxing of somebody online. You know, I don't want to be around that. I don't need to be around that. And
is it for brand reasons, for brand safety reasons, because of your brand? Like, are you worried that your brand is being tarnished by his brand and being on that brand?
I wouldn't say, it's funny because you say about brand, I don't treat myself as having a brand or being a brand.
Oh, you're a brand. You're big time.
Well, I think of it more as like, certainly I have I'm self-aware enough to know that I have a persona on Twitter, on X, on social in general, and I make money from social media as my career. And so, yes, to some degree, there's a brand there. But for me, it's not necessarily that. I think certainly I'd feel there was a level of hypocrisy, as I mentioned earlier, that if I stayed on the platform, but yet every week I'm sort of slating what he's doing and yet still using the platform, that seemed a bit ridiculous to me to continue to do. So I think that was one of the things. But in terms of kind of like, I just don't want to be part of a platform that is chaotic and out of control and continuing to get worse, and to somehow there's a level of endorsement or support, you know, maybe indirectly by my being there and feeding the beast. So I felt that I didn't need to do that anymore or didn't want to do that anymore. So I chose to go elsewhere. And don't get me wrong, I think other people said, well, Threads isn't going to be, you know, it might not even take off. It might not be, you know, might not work out, and it might not. You know, I'm not suggesting for one moment that my movement from X to Threads is me saying I'm putting all my chips on Threads and it's going to work out because I think it's brilliant. It's not perfect. There's lots of issues with Threads, and it may not become the thing that some people might want it to be in terms of a text-based platform. But I think it's got the strongest chance of being successful compared to the other options out there. There are no direct platforms that are equal in terms of distribution and scale and do everything that Twitter or X does. So it's a case of, again, it's sacrificing something for what you think is right and wrong. And so I have moved to Threads and I'm comfortable with that. But I've gone from 175,000 followers. Not that that's the most important metric, but as an indicator, it certainly gives you an idea. To something like at the moment on Threads, 22,000, and like my X account generates 5 to 15 million social media impressions. I don't have those stats for Threads, but it won't be anywhere near that. So there are lots of things that I'm going to lose by this move. So I think if anyone sort of thinks there's anything that I'm not going to lose, that they'd be wrong. There is definitely a risk that is being taken by me, but I don't think there's much choice at this point.
It's interesting because that's the part of your decision that I find fascinating, right? There's guys like us that deal at Crier Media. We've got a podcast network, just over 100 podcasts. So, you know, social media is very important. You want to get those micro clips to people. You want to get those links to people. You want them to sub. You want to continually put your stuff in front of them. And Twitter is functionally, based on what it used to be, still, in my opinion, one of those instant places where you can actually get seen. And there are a lot of people that make a lot of money on Twitter. There are people that have invested time into growing followers on Twitter, and to walk away from an account, like I think that we've got, I've got 92,000 people on my account. I think we've got another account with 40,000 people on it. It's the official Crier Media account. To walk away from 120,000 like captive voices, captive eyeballs, captive thumbs, right? To walk away from that based on principle there are not a lot of people, Matt, who are willing to do that at this point, which is why I find your choice interesting. Was there a personal choice? Because I know that you were threatened at some point as well.
Oh, I had, so one of the things that I've weirdly not ever had a major problem with, which a lot of people have issues with the platform, are things to do with, being harassed or
Yeah.
abused or trolled in some way, and kind of that become,
You
people
just
saying,
accept it at this point. Like, I don't
yeah.
know if you're like me. I just accept it, and I just assume that's a bot or they're mentally ill. So I just pass it
Well,
off.
I think for me, it's like there's things. The closest thing I can compare it to is like people. Some of my friends hate horror movies, but I love horror movies, and like even the most twisted, messed up horror movies have no effect on my sleeping patterns or being scared in any way. I find it almost pure entertainment because it's so ridiculously over the top scare sort of content that it becomes, it doesn't become real to me. And I think when people have ever trolled me on a very few number of occasions where I've had those sorts of incidents, it's so ridiculously over the top, nasty, vicious vitriol kind of, you want your child to be raped and all these horrendous things. I think it's beyond ridiculous. So it ceases to be real to me. I don't feel threatened in it. I think it's wrong, and I think it's unpleasant, but it doesn't hit me in any way. It's very surface level. It's easy to deflect, and I know that not everybody is like that, but certainly that's how I've seen it. And the incident I think you're referring to was actually in regards to Instagram, where but I had some on Twitter as well, where I replied as a comment to Russell Brand's post recently with the accusations laid against him, and said I thought it was kind of in a number of words. I said it was inappropriate that he had kind of seemingly ignored to talk in any way about the accusations, and talked about everything else. And I felt that a lot of his stuff was very much kind of conspiracy theorist type content, which felt like a deflection of everything. And that led to people posting on my accounts, all of my social accounts, things like your daughter's going to get raped, and does anyone know that Matt Navarro is a paedophile? Do your friends and family know this information, and everything else? So I've had that, but that for me on Twitter has never been part of the problem with it. I think, as I say, for me, 175,000 followers, money that could be still made in that platform, that may be the case, but I think that the more people like myself leave the platform, the more likely that process is sped up, and I'd rather that place became worse, so that it became, less people used it, and that it became a place that was ignored and didn't have the cultural relevance it once had for the safety of others, than for me to continue there, and for people to maybe hang around to see my posts, because I'm just adding to the train wreck that X is right now.
Yeah, I would venture a guess to say you actually make it better every time you post, just because of what you post. But I get that, and how much of it is real? I mean, you talk about the unrealistic, over the top horror movie kind of bullshit that we see on a day to day basis, whether it's threats. And dude, if I don't get called a pedophile at least 3 to 5 times a day, if I don't get threatened at least 3 to 5 times a week, it's an odd week on this platform. Not something that happened, prior to Elon Musk burning that brand down. But how much of that hate do you think is real? Do you have any numbers on that? Because when I talk to people in this space, or we talk about some of the hate and the ridiculous overtop, like we had some people this weekend, it was a big thing about assassinating the Prime Minister of Canada. I'm like, this is fucking crazy. And it was legitimately driven by eggs, bunch of numbers, accounts that had 2 followers, and it's on and on and on. And there's a majority of those people. But how much, and I don't even know if you can qualify or quantify this, how much of that over the top hatred is actually real, and how much of it is not, in your opinion? Like,
Well,
how much of it is generated, how much of it is AI, and how much of it is intentional on behalf of the platform?
I think that, one of the problems we've got now with Elon Musk being in charge is that we haven't got a reliable mechanism or a reliable source of information about the health of the platform. Certainly, anyone that is a third party that is brought out figures or stats or insights to do with the platform, whether it's to do with growth or to do with, safety on the platform or the level of abuse, all of the indicators show a negative trend, as in whatever it is getting worse. It's more broken, more dangerous, more horrible content, less growth, slower growth. But everything you hear from Linda Yaccarino, the new CEO, and Elon Musk suggests that things are on the up and everything's going great, and that's all rubbish. You don't know, so it's hard
Like
to know.
Baghdad Bob, do you remember when Iraq got invaded? I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, where Baghdad Bob bombs are falling in the background, and Baghdad Bob's like, "We got him right where we want him." It's like,
well, he's a master of kind of like spin. Like, you can give him
Yeah.
that. He's very good at kind of creating a different to reality, an alternative reality to the one that everyone else is seeing. But in terms of, to answer your question, I couldn't put a number on it. But what I would say is it often doesn't matter too much around how much of it is real, in terms of people saying that they're going to go and beat someone up, or that they're going to murder someone, or inciting violence. Often it's more about the impact it has on people on a day-to-day level mentally, than someone's mental health. And also, generally, constant abuse kind of puts people in a place with all the other things that are going on in the world, just brings them down further. There are examples, as we all know, that of real consequences for some of this stuff. If you only need to look at the stuff that happened in America with the Washington Capitol, Washington DC, and around the Trump time, that's that wasn't just, in fairness, a Twitter thing. That was Meta's products as well. But it certainly, it does feel, for me, my personal anecdotal experience of Twitter is that has worsened. People often ask me, "Oh, is X going to die? Is it just going to eventually just go out of business and that bit?" I don't think that's at all what will happen. It will just become a different kind of place. It will be used for different reasons by a different group of people, and the mixture of content and the type of characters that you'll find on there, or the sort of push towards the extremes in terms of the content, that the most extreme left and the extreme right of the political spectrum will be fighting all they can on the platform, and it will just become less enjoyable. Generally, it would be less safe for brands, it'll be less safe for news organizations in there. It's already becoming less reliable and trustworthy, and it's becoming almost impossible to know what's real and what's not on the platform. Again, other platforms have these issues with AI as well, but Twitter seems worse placed because of the lack of investment it seems to be making in some of these things, and more of the cuts that it's making. So I don't know. I just don't feel that X is a safe place, and I don't see any trajectory shift happening in the short to medium term. And because I don't feel confident in that shift happening, or a positive kind of recalibration by Elon, I think it makes no sense for me to continue on the platform.
Yeah, dude, you're crushing it from an ethical standpoint right now, and I appreciate that more than you know, because not a lot of people in that space have values, but you do, and you're following your values, and it's going to cost you money. How can you look at the intentionality of the changes that he's made in the last year and a half and draw any other conclusion other than he has burned down one of the great? Like, have you in your life ever seen anybody burn down a brand or brand equity like we've seen?
No, I think a lot of people have made the quip, the joke about watching Elon burn his 44 billion, and have you ever seen a man destroy something that he spent so much money on so quickly, and things. And of course, it would make no sense that he would be intentionally, knowingly destroying that value or that money. He obviously has a very different stance and viewpoint and level of confidence in the decisions that he's making, in the direction he's taking the business. It's one that I don't think many others seem to see as being sensible or likely to bring about the results that maybe he wants. But certainly the decisions he's made have continued to cause additional problems and more reasons for people to exit the platform, and more importantly for them as a business, as a product that generates majority of its income through ad revenue. Its immediate problem is that advertisers have started to sort of pause advertising or to cease advertising, and without any alternative business model to fund the organization and to pay down the debt, then it becomes a problem, because certainly X Premium as a subscription business has not taken off. Less than, I think the figures are between 0.3 0.5% of all active users have paid the premium for subscription plan, which doesn't doesn't help with what his goal was, to make it less likely that bots and spam accounts would be a problem, because the idea being that if everybody's verified and everybody is as kind of paid money, it makes it less economically viable for them to operate, and also everyone can be more trusting of other accounts because we know they're all verified by at least a credit card or something. Well, if 0.3% of the if people are using it, then that doesn't work, and certainly it's not making any substantial amount of money. And I don't think that that's anything's going to change on that front. So
how much do you think he's lost? How much do you think he's lost in the last year? Like, how much is that
I've seen
platform
figures
bled?
estimating that the value of Twitter's dropped by double-digit multiples of millions. So 10, 20, 30 million, billion, sorry, a billion, not million. So it's hard to put a figure on it, and I'm probably not the best place to be talking about valuations of companies, as that's not my area of expertise. But
well, what about like revenue? Like pre Elon, what were they doing a year, and post Elon, now brand safety being the issue that it is, and all the bullshit that we've seen, the proliferation of misinformation, disinformation, brands deciding, hey, we're done. And I mean, the Hamas thing and the disinformation that rolled around with Hamas, and the European Union saying, hey. They said the same thing to Zuck, if I'm not mistaken, about Facebook and Meta, where they said you need to regulate this stuff. Like, and I mean, the floodgates are now open, but no one wants to be associated with this from a brand standpoint anymore, correct? And what would that number be per year?
Well,
according to what
I can say is that in terms of we've seen figures banded around that as much as 60% of advertisers have dropped away in the US, for example, and many of them have not come back. And you're getting towards figures of like halving their advertising roster, which invariably, depending on which advertisers there are, it could well be that many of those are smaller advertisers, but I think we're going to see more big advertisers pull out, and on a more permanent basis. I know that I've spoken to clients of mine who that are very well known, very global big brands, and they have said to me that they are already making contingency plans to make the call of to pause or completely pull out of using Twitter and advertising using Twitter. So I think that those problems are going to get worse, not better, and that's going to create a big tension for the CEO in terms of Linda Yaccarino, who comes from an advertising background, and her kind of big goal at the moment is to kind of reinvigorate the advertising and the clients, get them back on the platform. But at the other side, you've got the owner of the company who is kind of seems to be doing everything in their powers to kind of work against that. So there's invariably a tension there, and I think that relationship will continue to be strained. And my hunch with that is that either she'll be pushed or she will jump, and it's not a case of if she will do that, it's when she will do that, or when that will happen. We've seen it enough times with Elon Musk, when people don't sign up to his way of thinking or disagree with him, he quite quickly will retaliate and cut them loose, or people will feel that they cannot continue to be working in such an environment or supporting such a regime and jump. So and I think that seems likely to happen. But yeah, the advertising is critical for this business to proceed and to be successful, and Elon's actions are destroying that. And I think at the core of that is something that was mentioned by a lot of people, but particularly in the recent book that was published by Walter Isaacson, about the fact that it doesn't get how to run a social media business. Social media requires you to have an understanding of humans and human interaction and human psychology and social being socially aware about how engaging with others and connecting with other people. And Elon is very much one of his weakest areas is all of that stuff. He is an engineer. He's a brilliant entrepreneur. He has many talents and many skills that are beyond those of most normal regular human beings, but the bit that a social network needs is something that's very different to that of all of his other businesses. And for that fact, I think he has a big blind spot there, and if he doesn't see that or is unwilling to accept that, then that business is in trouble. So that's where we are.
Matt Navarre is our guest, social media consultant out of Europe. I believe you're in Wales, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
People sometimes think I'm American. Some people say I'm Canadian, and I live in Wales. I'm actually English. I was born in Bristol, but I live in Wales, in Cardiff right now. So that's pretty accurate compared to most people's assumptions.
Yeah, no, I googled you, and former, actually born in England, have the UK passport. I got the red passport. There we go. Nice to see me. I can come and see you anytime. I can just zip down there. I can walk into the country. I can come to your
Well, my
house, see your
sister
new
lives
reno.
in Canada, so she's also
Oh,
dual
really?
citizenship. She lives in
Of course.
Vancouver.
Oh, okay, the left coast is what we call it. Beautiful place this time of year. Do you ever
Yeah,
get over
so
here? Do you ever come to Canada?
she comes over here more than I go over there, but we've been both directions. But she's dual citizenship. She's lived in Canada for more than 15 years now, so she's very much part of the furniture in Canada now.
Well, good. I'm happy to have her, as is my family. A lot of people came from England back in the day for different opportunities. My dad did. And this is a beautiful place to live. 35, 40 million people in this country. Really kind of a wart on the ass of social media, Google, et cetera. We're having our war with Meta. Canada is having their C18, C11, these two bills that are like, hey,
Mm.
we want you to pay Canadians for the right to use that privilege. And that kind of leads me to my next question. Where do we go right here in Canada? I mean, everybody's looking for the next thing. Everybody's looking to get their stuff seen. As a social media consultant, one of Europe's best, someone who really has his finger on the pulse. And by the way, Geek Out, I highly suggest everybody go subscribe to that newsletter. If you go to mattnavarro.com, you can do so. You're big on threads right now. You're kind of taking that leap, but I know Blue Sky is out there. We're seeing decentralized platforms becoming a thing. I still can't get an invite for Blue Sky, by the way. I've tried to sign up twice. It's very difficult. But where do we go now? I mean, not just in Canada, but around the world. Everybody's looking for that thing, and we're watching Elon burn that down. Meta's going through their stuff. Threads is trying to find its footing. I know that you're big on it. Trending is starting to come to Threads. It's not that much of a mess anymore. But where does the free world that wants to communicate in groups socially and get their stuff seen, in your mind, what's next?
Well, I think in terms of alternatives to Twitter or X, there is no direct opposite platform or platform that's most similar. That most platforms that are kind of Twitter-like don't have many of the things that people need or want from it. If you've come from X, i.e., particularly the scale and reach. Twitter has now 200-300 million users on it. Threads has I think like 90, 100, 120, something like that. Much less. And Blue Sky and T2, which is now I think been renamed Pebble, and a few other platforms, Mastodon and other decentralized platforms have far less users than that. So in terms of scale, there's nowhere else directly comparable. And then in terms of like functionality, Blue Sky feels very much like Twitter. It's an offshoot of something that Jack Dorsey was doing before he left there, and it certainly feels very much almost like a carbon copy of Twitter to many people who use it. But it's got a number of users compared to the others, and its big area, of course, is decentralization. It's this part of the Fediverse, which a lot of these products are now being made kind of to connect to. Mastodon and the others are all much of a muchness. So there isn't a direct place to jump to have a Twitter-like experience. Threads, the problem with Threads for many people who have been on X and want a X Twitter-like experience, but they want the distribution, but they also want it to be ready for news and real-time kind of content, they're going to be disappointed because Meta and Adam Mosseri, head of Instagram, head of Threads, has said on multiple occasions very clearly he is not going to be encouraging or building products to incentivize, to motivate news, journalism, that kind of content. The content that to many people makes Twitter awful, but also is its kind of mojo, the thing that people are most is famous for.
But
He
why is
doesn't
that?
want.
Why won't Threads engage in amplifying news? And we're seeing less of that on social media platforms as well.
Well, I think for several reasons, particularly for Meta, the reasons are that Meta's had its fingers burnt many times. Every kind of interaction it's had with news organizations and publishers and in government institutions in terms of regulators as well around news has led to no end of problems. It's led to hearings in the Senate. It's led to people having to pay out millions or even tens of millions of dollars to publishers or to
News being
regulators.
blocked in Canada. on all those
Yeah, and then there's
platforms.
this whole debate where, it's not just in Canada. We've had this debate in Europe, and there's countries. I think only this week. I think is it in Germany? I think they've had to start paying a certain amount per year. They've had to do the same in France. They had to do the same in Australia because there's this assumption that somehow that Meta benefits from news more than news benefits from Meta, and therefore, if it's adding value to Meta, Meta should pay for it, which I think is ridiculous. Because I think at worst, it's a reciprocal arrangement. They get the distribution and the reach and the engagement from people sharing this news content on the platform through Meta's platform. It's not Meta pumping it through, it's users making that choice to share that content, and all of that content ultimately, for most of the publishers, leads to people being driven to their door and ultimately potentially making them add revenue through landing on their website. So it makes no sense to me that this idea of a link tax, is what some would call it, that Meta owes it to the news industry. I think that's more the news industry hasn't adapted to the modern world, and it's now realized over the last decade that it's been in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, dude,
So
and it's funny because that's the narrative up here, and we keep saying that is like, here in Canada, as socialist as we are, we like to pretend we are. The idea that in look at it like a billboard, like how many billboard companies out there will go to the Matt Navarres of the world or the Crier Medias of the world and go, hey, listen, we'll pay you to use our billboard. We're going to pay you to get that messaging out. Your messaging. It's completely backwards.
It's a crazy argument, and it's just yet another problem that they've had with the news industry. But Meta, equally hasn't been great in terms of its relationship with publishers. It famously, in the last decade, in fact, and when I was working very much in the mix of all of this stuff with a news publisher, was telling everybody who worked in media to pivot to video. And if you Google pivot to video and publishers and Meta, you'll find all the stories at the time about it. And lots of publishers did do this, thinking this is what was going to get them the traffic. And this relationship was, a good relationship with Meta. Everybody was sort of happy to some degree. They had distribution, and Meta provided the tools, and they would kind of be led by what Meta told them. And then people did pivot to video, did lots of video investment, quite expensive, time consuming, and quite a reorganization of some types of publisher. And then Meta, for various different reasons, kind of decided not to do so much of that and pivot away from certain things, and took away some of the tools and features, and as it does, changes its mind regularly, and that caused all sorts of losses, and many media publishers went out of business directly as a part of all of that. So that amongst many other stories, the relationship has been fraught for Meta with news publishers. And so that, combined with the fact that most of the arguments and debate and awfulness of X and Twitter revolves around politics and religion and news content, and they just don't want to be part of that. They don't feel that they need to be part of that. And actually, that if it comes to the platform of its own accord, which it probably will already is, then that would be fine. And that they will kind of create tools that might benefit it, but indirectly, because they'd be building tools for maybe sports or lifestyle content or other things, but they're not going to directly court it. And I don't think you're going to see them ever coming out and saying Threads is the new real-time platform. I think the problem they've got slightly is that there certainly was a sense or a feeling that when they were sort of teasing Threads, that they were kind of saying it was a killer, Twitter killer, and it was going to be a kind of its stab at being Twitter. So when it launched, people rightly was expecting all of what you get with Twitter, what you want from Twitter, was going to be what Threads would be. And now it's like, well, no, actually, we don't want to do the news bit, which is like, well, that's kind of key to the kind of whole thing. So I think that's where we are. But a lot of what's going on in social, in a more broad, if you zoom out a bit further from just X and Meta, is this shift towards private social. And a lot of what's going on now is that there's been a trend that people do not share content to public feeds in the same volume that they used to do. The days of early parts of 2010s onwards, where people would share quite regularly to their Instagram feed and to their Facebook feed, and people would look at news feed, all of that behavior has really shifted, and the volumes have dramatically dropped. And people have now, with the onset of AI powered algorithms, where it's less about who you've actively intently chosen to follow and less about being verified and having 1 million followers as being the major signal that leads to you seeing their content in your feeds, is actually less important. It's much more about now what are the things what are the behaviors you're displaying in the platform that are teaching the platform to know what you want to see, and what are the sorts of pieces of content you're engaging with, regardless of if you've chosen to follow them, regardless if they're very popular or they've got a blue tick or anything else. It becomes more of a democratic kind of content process, and so it's publishers and content creators have had to think differently about how they approach it. And I think actually, not Elon Musk, Adam Mosseri was on a podcast recently talking about all of the growth that's happened. If there has been growth in Instagram's feed, has been video. It's been more than images, even though people think of Instagram as an image platform. But actually, the biggest amount of growth has been where people have been spending time on direct messages and stories, ephemeral content. That's where all the growth is. And so a lot of the platforms now are developing features and new tools and spin-off apps that revolve around private sharing. So we've seen Instagram channels and WhatsApp channels, these one-to-many broadcast products, and you're seeing lots of things to do with creating
segmentation, right? You're talking about segmentation of communities and audiences. Like, it's not so
giving
much
people a way, making it easier for people to share and engage in content in a more private, sort of restricted manner, so that people are talking to like-minded people, the people that they really care about most, rather than posting on Twitter or on Facebook to public, and then anyone in the world can start sending you vitriol and having a debate with you. Because one of the big the sort of big things that Mark Zuckerberg and all of these platforms said in the beginning of all of this decades ago was like, we want to bring the world together. Everybody who can connect the world, connect everybody, put everyone in the same space, and that will be a good thing, because connection and building connections around the world can only be a good thing. And to some degree, there is value and truth in that. But the reality, is we've all learned, is that actually one random person in Ohio versus one person randomly from somewhere in Canada, in Montreal, versus someone in India versus someone in Russia, are all going to be very, very different and have extremely different views, often in terms of politics and religion and the state of the world and health. And when you put that on a scale of billions of people into the same space and let them mix, it ends in tears. And we've seen all of the drama, all of the kind of disasters of content moderation, which have failed. The tools that have never really been there scaled and worked anywhere near effectively enough, and actually putting everyone together on a platform hasn't worked out. So now we've all kind of all somewhat organically, but I'm sure slightly cajoled by the way the platforms have pushed us down the path to some degree, but we've somewhat decided amongst ourselves that actually we feel much safer sharing things in private spaces, in private groups, in DM group chats with friends and family, in communities that we set up ourselves, and we set limits on who can participate, and then only engaging in public feeds in a much more limited fashion because of all of the things we just discussed.
Fascinating. It's almost the beginning of the end of social media to that extent.
It certainly
right?
is. We've gone up the bell curve and come down the other side
Yeah.
in terms of public sharing, private sharing, and people's savviness with social, and people's being more cynical, more skeptical, less trusting, more aware of the risks and dangers, and wanting to make the time spend the time in a more meaningful way. And people increasingly, although the use of social media continues to rise on an average, global average, I think people are being much more selective with how they spend that time. And we're now, rather than being an Instagram person and being 90% of your time in social is on Instagram and then maybe something else, people are much more likely to have 3, 4, 5 social platforms or apps that they regularly use, and they use them for very distinct purposes. Like for me, WhatsApp's about friends and family, but also my own geek out community. Instagram, I stay in contact with people that are kind of like not close friends, but people I kind of want to see what they're up to in the world. And then Facebook, because I've got friends and family still. I think that's what most people nowadays.
Oh, that's just for vacation photos now, right? Facebook's just
yeah,
for
baby
vacation. Make
pictures
people feel bad about their
to
lives.
be honest, it's become death book, because whenever I'm on Facebook, all I see on there is, did you know so and so from school 5 years ago, that guy in our years died, and someone's been kidnapped, and someone else has been murdered, and you're like, oh, I don't want to hear it. So Facebook is death book for me. And
it's not only death book; it's like family reunion book, high school reunion book. But
they're all coming in now.
Yeah, they're coming right now because it's the fall. But what I also love about Facebook, it's also the presentational living book, where they just show, like, they'll show a family on vacation. This is what I've always loved about Facebook, which is why I'm not on it personally at all. We are as a company, but that's it. Is you know, I wish that they would show the videos. Like, it's like, here's me on vacation having a mimosa. I'm like, I need you to show what happened before that, where you were screaming at the kids and you and your husband got into it because he drank too much the night before. Like, no one ever shows their worst on Facebook. That's
Well,
what I want to see.
that's the thing that obviously we all really deep down know, but we still somewhat choose to ignore, like, and we can make ourselves pretty depressed about. You know, as adults, we're only marginally better at remembering that fact that this is a book of the most, someone's life highlights, their high moments, their top moments. And actually, you'll notice that some of the most successful creators or people that become very successful as creators and influencers are often the ones that started to show more of their vulnerability and more of their
super connective tissue, right? Social
Yeah.
media, like you show vulnerability on social media, there's connective tissue for the rest of the
People,
world.
yeah,
We all
want
feel
to
like
have
shit.
relationships and connections with
Yeah.
people that they feel are actually similar to them. There was a period for a decade of social, maybe it's still true to this day, but maybe not anywhere near what it used to be, which was it was an aspirational influencer or creator, somebody that was somewhat godly, like, you know, had some sort of higher level of beauty or intelligence or lifestyle that you kind of aspired to have. Whereas now people almost feel repelled by that and actually feel like it's flexing, and it's kind of like it's not authentic. That word you hear a lot with social media. Is it authentic social media? So, you know, and I think anyone that's got children will know that the challenge of the fact it's very hard to keep them off social media. And I got two children. I've got a 10-year-old boy and a 13-year-old daughter. And, you know,
Oh, that's the social media wheelhouse right there, right?
well, it's pretty,
13-year-old
you know, people somewhat think I've got some extra level of knowledge or skill. Whatever I choose is the right thing to do, but I'm no better judge at it and no more skilled at making the right decisions for my children in social media than most. Obviously, I know a bit more because it's my life for 20 years or whatever. But in terms of the decisions where, like, I have a daughter come home and she's telling me that she's been on TikTok and she's seen these horrific things, or some people are bullying her on Snapchat and they've sent her this really abusive message, and they're all doing a group chat talking about her and stuff, and her crying about it and wishing that she looked better because all the girls on Instagram look so beautiful, and she knows that that's not true, but blah 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 blah. And you kind of like, you see her pouring her heart out, and it's like genuinely stops her from doing things in life. And I don't think she's unusual in that respect. That stuff's hard to see, and your instant reaction is, what, just stop using social media, lock it down, do not use it, it's not healthy, it's not helpful. But that isn't the solution, because people have to, unfortunately, there are things that are beneficial to social media and things that help her grow as a person, and my son to grow as a person, and they're going to grow up needing to know how to navigate this stuff. So it's a very difficult balance to figure out, how do you educate them that this is not what reality is like for most people. Do not take this at face value, and don't take it to heart, but also learn how to kind of work with it and how to kind of, self-moderate. But they are addictive platforms. They feed you. I'm terrible. I can sit up at up till 2 a.m. scrolling TikTok and going, oh my God, I just need to stop now, Jesus Christ, because even though it's entertaining, it destroys my sleep.
Yeah,
so,
where the last 2 hours ago? Do you ever sit there and you're halfway through a show or halfway through a soccer game and you're like, oh my God, I didn't watch any of that? Like, you know what I mean?
I've talked about my ADHD, and it's part of what thankfully has made me successful. I've kind of leaned into the benefits of ADHD, but like I'm more ADHD than I ever was, and I definitely can see how younger people who don't have ADHD have some of the challenges that are similar to ADHD. I don't think that using social media makes you suddenly become ADHD or get ADHD. I think it gives you some of the aspects of the deficits that people with ADHD have, and they can never get rid of. And so, I see my son sometimes playing on an Xbox with his iPhone to the side of him with a video on and having a chat message in another window. I'm like, that's 3 things. How are you doing? It's no wonder regular life is boring to you, because nothing is that fast paced.
Input.
Yeah,
right?
it's just not. It's not. It cannot be healthy for you. And I try and sort of just do one of those things, and then put one to one side and do the other one, and then stop that and then do the other one. But as soon as you walk out the room, it's just like, yeah, whatever. Dad.
Well, and then we go and do the exact same thing. Like, I mean,
and
that's
exactly. And I'm the worst person to be telling the kids to do stuff, because I am all of those things and worse. And I'm always being told off, Dad, put your phone down, put your phone down, put your phone down.
Yeah, we're having dinner. Dad, you get that one? Dad, we're having dinner. Put that down.
Exactly,
Dad,
exactly. So I do try. Like I'm better than I ever was. Like we went on holiday this year. I took the kids to Cyprus, and and I put my phone down, and I was quite happy. It wasn't I'm going to make a conscious effort. It was actually I'm quite happy to check out of social for 10 days. And if I'm not going to be using it, we're here to enjoy it together. Let's all enjoy it together. And we were, as a family, we're pretty good on that holiday. And I think as we get older, I'm becoming better at disciplining that. Like at a dinner table, I'm like, you can use social media all the time you want when you're in the house, because that's just life. I cut it off at 7 o'clock. So like my son goes to bed at 8. So if by 7 o'clock it locks down, so he has an hour without any stuff before bed. My daughter goes to bed at 9. Hers cuts off at 8 o'clock. For at the dinner table, at any dinner table, for any meal with anyone, the phones are not on the table.
No.
And
phones in the room? Are you a phones in the room person? You let them have them in the room?
They do, but they're locked down. They have them in the bedroom, but they lock down because they use them as alarm clocks and stuff. But yeah, so I do have limited rules on there, but I think the way to deal with social media with children isn't to lock it down. It's actually to educate them, give them the tools to be able to figure out how to navigate it and how to,
and how to understand it. Like how to understand who's that, what is that about, who are these people, what are these eggs and bunch of numbers, how does it affect me on a personal level, and how to respond to it, understanding and responding to it well, right? And sometimes responding to it is not using it. Sometimes responding to it is, understanding that the person that launched that hate-filled expletive rant in your DMs is some dude in St. Petersburg who just is looking for a gas, right? Like, I mean, that's the way I understand it. I've got kids. I've got 3 men, young men, 23, 20, 18. And it's all the time. Like, I mean, and some of them make money online. Some of them use it to promote some of their projects, et cetera, et cetera. And I find that I'm at the end of the day, I'm like, and the pandemic was like rocket fuel for them, where you're like, how do you tell these guys not to look at it when we're trapped in the house? We were locked down here in Canada. So it's almost like the behaviors got cooked and then they got put on super vapors at some point during the pandemic, where you're like, how do you dial it back? And I don't think you can outside the education piece, to your point, because I'm the same. Like I'm telling them to dial it back, and I find myself after an hour and a half scrolling through something going, that's enough. Like I need to get up and go do something productive. I just lost an hour of my life. And that is the goal of these apps, right? It's to keep you on it as long as humanly possible.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a constant tension between what the apps are trying to get you to do for their own benefit versus what is healthy and right for us individually to do. But it's I don't think anyone's balance is perfect. I think that everybody's what people deem as appropriate levels of social media use will be different for every family, and that's okay too. I just think that trying to shut it down and lock it down, or completely just leaving it as a complete tap they can control themselves without any support with that is a dangerous combination. And I think that's actually surprised me quite a lot, that the number of parents I know that literally agree with the sort of the challenge of you can't lock them out of it and they have to use it, their friends are on it and stuff, but then they kind of seem to have kind of given up all attempts to control or limit it or educate. They kind of like, oh, it's the school's responsibility, or well, it's going to happen anyway, so they might as well just get on with it, and then they just use it whenever they can. There's no off tap, and I think that's particularly dangerous, and more dangerous if your relationship with your child is one where you don't talk as a family hugely, or if there's any other tensions in a family, that can be a very serious danger for young people. From my experience, I think communicating with the kids, giving them some boundaries, teaching them how to use it, and setting some limits around it. But that may well be the best most parents can do.
Or turn off the Wi-Fi.
Or turn off the Wi-Fi when you're really pissed off with them. Do that.
Yeah. What do you mean? This play? What are we in the 20s? No Wi-Fi. Matt Navarra, really appreciate you being here. Thank you for giving us so much of your time today. I would highly encourage everybody to unsubscribe to his newsletter. It's called Geek Out. It's a tremendous look at what's new in the world of social media for social media managers. There's a pro version of this as well. You're also a consultant available for any speaking engagement, one of Europe's most in-demand social media consultants. Matt is incredible. Bylines in BBC, The Verge, TechCrunch, etc. So go to his website. His link tree, again, is in the description of this podcast, Google, Apple, Spotify, etc. You can also get it on YouTube, Twitch. Matt, thank you for taking time to do this morning and being so generous with your time, generous with your thoughts. Really appreciate it. Even though you're not on X anymore, I'm going to continue to follow you, and I really appreciate the education you continue to give me and everybody else. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me here.
I'll talk to you soon. Matt Navarre, ladies and gentlemen. Again, mattnavarre.com is where you can go and check him out. That's his website. Follow him there. He's awesome. He's so measured. He's one of those voices in the social media landscape where you're like, most people should be freaking out about quitting Twitter. Most people should be freaking out about some of the things that they've seen. And he just plots. He kind of just continues to educate people, continues to help you understand what you have to do to be successful, the drawbacks, the way these things work, some intentionality. And he's connected. He's plugged into the right people where he gives you the right information. So highly encourage you to go to mattnavarre.com. Highly encourage you to sign up for his Geek Out newsletter. It's a tremendous opportunity for you to educate yourself about this space as it evolves and as we've kind of covered that bell curve, and now we're coming down the other side, as Matt pointed out. Thanks to all of our friends and sponsors for making this possible, including Cantork. Go to cantork.com for more information today on how you can get yourself a torque wrench, looseners, fasteners, bolting solutions nobody else has in industries you cannot find a bolting solution for around the world. Nuclear, railroad, the steel industry, forestry, heavy machinery, it doesn't matter. You're going to love these guys. Colin Livingston out of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Yeah, that's right. We make good stuff here in Canada. He brought all the manufacturing back a number of years ago. Canadian made for industries around the world. Torque wrenches, the fabrication of them, manufacturing of them, cleaning of them, the engineering of them. If you need this, that's your guy. Go to cantork.com for more information today. And as always, brought to you by our friends at Gitch. Luxury branded boxer briefs, super breathable. They move with you. Very, very stretchy, very comfortable, made for every level of performance. Luxury branded underwear. The boxer briefs with the pouch in the front, you know what I'm talking about. They got the little pouch for your stuff made for Canadian men, so they're bigger. Go to edsfineimports.com and make sure you do yourself a favor. Just order a couple pairs and he'll send you a free pair when you use promo code GITCH3. That's right. 3 pairs of underwear. If you buy 3, he'll send you a 4th for free, and use GITCH3 as your promo code, and then you're off to the races. You get a free pair of underwear. That's what I do for you. So does Ed. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget, you can get everything we do at Crier Media. Go to crier.co today. And of course, head up to the Crier shop. We've got some clothes we want to sell you, including this beauty. The Stupid People Equal the New Pandemic shirt. $20. You can support independent media. We'd love for you to come and get this shirt. They come in white. They got a hat. They come in black. You can walk around. You can be passive aggressive. You can yell at people without actually saying a word, which is a lot of fun. We've also got the Schadenfreude shirt, thermal water bottles. Go to the Crier shop, order something, support local media. We really appreciate independent media. We always appreciate your support, especially when you buy something from us. So go to the Crier shop today, crier.co. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Appreciate you being here. We'll see you tomorrow with Lachlan Cross. Bye.